For glamorous Joyce Cohen, every day was party day.
She had expensive jewelry, 5 or 6 fur coats.
Her husband was a multi-millionaire Miami builder.
Stan was Joyce's prince.
She had a Coral Rock mansion in Coconut Grove, a Jaguar XK, and her own private jet.
My life with Stan, a lot of stories say it was a Cinderella story. And it was great.
But when someone crashed Cinderella's party, Joyce's world shattered. Greed, drugs, jealousy, and murder. Next on Snapped. Joyce Cohen had it all. Her husband was a multi-millionaire contractor. She had beauty, friends, taste, and style. Her luxury mansion high on Silver Bluff above Biscayne Bay was the envy of Miami.
Very old Coconut Grove home. This is a house made of coral rock many, many years ago.
With its handmade tile floors, cypress paneling, and old-world charm, it was the height of luxury. But Joyce was no homebody. She was A-list at South Florida's finest nightclubs. That Joyce had reached such heights was all the more precious because Joyce started life at rock bottom.
I grew up in about 27 foster families. I was in St. Vincent's Orphanage in Freeport, Illinois when I was little. I got shifted from relative to relative for a while.
She was abused as a child, and it was a really harsh life.
There definitely are scars, especially when you're bounced from one foster care to another. So it's like no one ever loves you. You're never good enough for one family to hold on to. And that's just sort of makes the situation worse and worse.
After a brief failed marriage, Joyce headed south to Miami.
She saw the opportunity, the bright lights, the big city, and this is where she came.
There, she found a job writing mortgages at a construction project in Broward County and soon caught the eye of a wealthy Miami builder named Stan Cohen.
Stan was the major partner in SAC Construction. Those initials are Stanley A. Cohen.
Stanley was a wonderful businessman, highly respected. He was extremely organized, very honest.
In Miami's sweet, sultry heat, Joyce and Stan fell in love.
She was 17 years older. She was in her early 20s.
She represented an innocence and a vulnerability that Stan liked. Joyce saw him as strength and something she never had, security. And he really seemed to love her.
You've got the father figure part of it, somebody older that's well established, that's got their life in order, and so you can walk in and have this secure, safe life where someone's going to take care of you.
But Stan had been married 3 times before didn't worry Joyce one bit. 6 months after meeting, the couple eloped to Las Vegas.
They were very much in love with each other.
To me, it was a Cinderella story, maybe because of where I came from.
Stanley certainly showed Joyce a great life that any normal working girl could never possibly have had. Took her all over the world. He had jet airplanes, he had cars, money, everything.
Joyce worked hard to make her new husband happy.
She was sweet, and she really had the Jewish traditional dinners for his parents, and they helped take care of his father and mother.
Things may have been peaceful and sweet inside the Cohen home, but outside, Miami was raging.
Miami was a hot place back in those days, and there was a lot of money in Miami, and a lot of drugs, and a lot of murders and killings.
In Miami at the time, home invasion, robberies were occurring on a regular basis.
The serpent in paradise in 1980s Miami was, of course, cocaine. People were robbing and killing for it. For protection, Joyce and Stan put in a high-tech alarm system and a low-tech one, a ferocious Doberman named Mischief.
As soon as your car got anywhere near the driveway, Mischief would start going crazy, barking and yelling and screaming. And if she knew you, she would let you in the house. But if she didn't, she would carry the mitts.
Nearly as ferocious were Stan's son and daughter from his first marriage. Gary and Jerry did not take well to having a stepmother young enough to be their sister.
Stanley's children never approved of Joyce and Stanley's relationship, especially Jerry, the daughter, who felt a great rivalry for her father's affections.
Those situations are very complicated where you have, an older gentleman marrying somebody that's younger, and then they've got these kids that are about the same age as the new wife. So, you take it from the kid's perspective, it's hard to imagine why this woman would want to be with their father. So for them in that situation, it would seem like maybe they couldn't understand why she would marry him unless it was for his money.
And the money was rolling in. Miami was in the middle of a building boom, and Stan's construction business was booming right along with it. Soon the couple began taking frequent ski trips out west.
They took a lot of trips with the ski club. On one occasion, when they were in Steamboat Springs, Colorado, they decided this is the place for us.
Joyce and Stan built a vacation ranch outside Steamboat Springs called Wolf Run. Stan loved it.
He was a cowboy at heart. He loved just being able to be his natural self in his old torn jeans and throw on a hat.
It was in Steamboat Springs that Joyce began to come into her own.
She changed from a very shy, demure girl to a sophisticated, well-dressed, wealthy woman.
With Stan spending more and more time in Florida, Joyce became the toast of Colorado's celebrity ski crowd, and the crowd did a lot of toasting.
There were several incidents where she got wasted in some of the nicer restaurants in town, and Stanley wasn't happy about that.
To lure Joyce back to Florida where he could keep an eye on her, Stan bought Buccioni's, a restaurant in Coconut Grove, and put her in charge of running it.
And here was Joyce greeting you at the door, dressed to the nines, made up beautifully.
I think that Joyce did grow up a lot in those years, and that she made a place for herself, and she made some of her own friends, and that was a good thing.
The once shy and sweet Joyce had evolved into the life of the party. But as Joyce and her wealthy friends partied the night away at Buccioni's, Miami was evolving into an ever more violent and dangerous place. And that violence was about to change the Cohen's life forever. Snuggled up to her multi-millionaire husband, Joyce Cohen was loving the hot, sexy nights of South Florida. Her Coral Rock mansion, perched high above Key Biscayne, was oceans away from the Illinois orphanage where she grew up.
Stanley and Joyce appeared to have it all. They appeared to be happy, successful, healthy.
But all that would change in the early morning hours of March 7th, 1986.
Wait a minute, Stanley, now try to calm down, okay? Okay, all right, we got all involved together. Okay.
The 911 call came into the Miami Police Department at around 5:30 in the morning. It was a frantic call from Joyce, basically stating that she needed the police and rescue, that her husband had been shot.
When the cops got to the Cohen mansion, they found Stan face down in bed.
Very bloody scene. They found that he had been shot 4 times in the back of the head.
He was dead. The front door glass was shattered, but nothing was missing from the house. While the crime squad searched for clues, detectives took Joyce to the police station for questioning. Between sobs, she told them it was a home invasion robbery turned tragic. Earlier that night, when she was downstairs, sorting clothes for a rummage sale, Joyce said she heard a noise in the driveway.
I told my husband, and he got a gun out of the drawer and went outside.
But Stan found nothing, and he put his .38 on the nightstand and went to bed. Hours later, still downstairs, Joyce heard breaking glass. It was almost 5:30 a.m.
I started to go to my husband, and I saw the back of someone, and I kind of like froze, and they were like running out the door, and it sounded like they said, "Let's get the F out of here."
The cops found her story plausible, at least at first.
Home invasion robberies were pretty common, and it could have been very, very possible what she was saying actually took place.
But the more Joyce talked, the more the cops began finding holes in her story.
As she went through the timeline and the chain of events with the policeman, the officer said, something doesn't quite add up.
There were just too many inconsistencies in her statement.
When the questioning got personal, Joyce suddenly realized she was a suspect.
Her mood and her tone changed. She became very defensive. She told the police to get out of her house.
That stopped everyone cold. While detectives went to get a search warrant, the crime squad was shut out of the mansion. The coroner even had to leave Stan's body behind.
So the police have to get a search warrant, and Stanley Cohen lays dead on the floor on his back for 7 hours before the police can get back into the house.
Critical clues to the time of death were melting away in Miami's heat. The cops weren't allowed inside, but they could search outside, and there they made an important discovery.
They found a .38 caliber revolver thrown into the bushes in the front yard of the house.
That revolver belonged to Stanley.
It had been wiped clean of fingerprints, but it wasn't completely clean.
The gun had, between the hammer of the gun and the firing pin, what appeared to be tissue paper.
When they got back in the house 8 hours later, search warrant in hand, tissue was the first thing they looked for.
In the bathroom, there's a wastebasket, and they find another tissue, and this one has Joyce's mucus on it, and particles that might have been blowback from the gun.
And the cops soon turned up other incriminating details.
We found that their dog, which is Doberman Pinscher, was locked up. The alarm had been intentionally turned off.
That was enough to start an inquiry into Joyce's private life.
We've established that Joyce had the cocaine problem.
Some of the friends that she hung out around with just like to do drugs.
That's a huge reinforcer. You've got, I use this drug, I become this other person, I'm free, I have no inhibitions, people love me.
The cops also learned that because of her drug use, Stan was threatening divorce.
He told our accountant, Jay Rosen, and a few other people. And he also told her, when I leave you, I will leave you penniless.
Divorce was the motive the cops had been looking for.
The investigators got together, and we all reached a consensus that Joyce was in some way responsible for the death of Stanley Cohen.
And Stan's children agreed.
Her stepdaughter, Jerry, a local TV reporter and anchorwoman, told me, there wasn't much question when a woman is alone in the house with her husband and he's murdered, what else would you presume?
Stanley's children were as convinced as I was that Joyce was the murderer, and they couldn't wait for the police to do something.
Immediately after the funeral, Gary and Jerry moved to protect their father's assets.
I really didn't even have money to live. They went to a judge, and they were able to get everything frozen.
The house in Coconut Grove, his cars, his bank accounts, all of his wealth.
So after 13 wonderful years, Joyce's party had come to an abrupt end. The prime suspect in her husband's murder, the little orphan girl, was back at the bottom. But so far, the cops didn't have enough evidence to arrest her. Joyce Cohen was in stormy waters. With her wealthy husband dead and her assets frozen by her stepchildren, she was the prime suspect in her husband's murder. But was she guilty or innocent? Opinion in Coconut Grove split right down the middle.
Many people who were friends of Stanley Cohen believed firmly that she committed and was involved in this murder. And many people you will find today who were her friends will say that she had nothing to do with it.
The cops never doubted Joyce's guilt, but they didn't have enough proof to go to trial.
They were stymied. The prosecutor was not ready to indict in the face of the circumstantial evidence that they had.
We lacked a witness. We lacked any actual physical evidence to put that gun in her hand and show that she killed Stanley or that she conspired with someone else to have Stanley killed.
Then, several months later, a convicted felon doing time for home invasion robberies came forward with some information on Stan Cohen's murder. His name was Frank Zuccarello, and he claimed he knew Joyce from the Miami nightclub scene.
Frank Zuccarello, who was a home invader from Broward County, who had been charged with and convicted of a number of home invasion robberies, came forward and indicated that Joyce Cohen had hired him, Anthony Caracciolo, and Tommy Lamberti to commit the crime.
Police thought they finally had the break they were looking for. The problem was the other two felons denied all knowledge of Stan's murder. And when the cops brought up Zuccarello's name to Joyce, she claimed to have never heard of him. Prosecutors decided they still didn't have enough to arrest Joyce. So they waited, hoping something else would pop.
What happened next was that the case dragged on for 2.5 years.
Stan's children, though, never let up the pressure, and finally in October 1988, prosecutors decided to go with what they had.
I got to a point where it was now or never.
On October 24th, 1988, at the trailer in Chesapeake, Virginia, where she was living with a new boyfriend, Joyce was arrested for Stan's murder. The trial began on October 10th, 1989. Charged with murder in the first degree, Joyce was facing Florida's electric chair. From their opening statements, the prosecution painted her as a gold-digging, drug-crazy murderess.
Luella DeVille, yeah. Jeez, good thing I knew her. I would think, woo.
Her motive?
The motive in this case is very simple. It was money.
She had the cocaine habit. She was going to be divorced. She was going to be cut off from the money, from the lifestyle that she had grown accustomed to.
Nonsense, said the defense. No wife today is left with nothing.
I'm not stupid. I knew that if my husband and I divorced, I would get money.
The prosecution had several issues to cover. The gun and tissue, the alarm system and dog. But their big gamble was the credibility of their star witness, Frank Zuccarello.
Frank Zuccarello was a liar who was out to save his own skin and negotiate a better deal for himself while he was in prison.
He got out of 411 years of jail to testify against her.
She didn't love him anymore. She had everything to lose. If she couldn't file for divorce, she wouldn't get anything. The guy that we were going to kill was a respectable person, very well known. And she was known as a cokehead anyway.
On the stand, Zuccarello seemed sure of his story.
He had met with Joyce at a restaurant. She had drawn him a map of the inside of the house, told her what she wanted to do, and how she would set everything up, and let them into the house, upstairs to the bedroom, and after they shot Stanley, returned the gun, and she was to dispose of it.
But there was a problem with the time of death. Zuccarello swore the murder took place at 2:30 a.m. But the state's own medical examiner and expert witness, Dr. Charles Wetley, put the death closer to 5:30 a.m. The physical evidence was just as problematic for the prosecution.
There was no way that you could explain all the physical evidence involved in this case.
The tissue with Joyce's mucus and gunshot residue was critical. Prosecutors said she used it to wipe the gun. The defense said she blew her nose on it and the gunshot residue came from Stan's body. Then, mid-trial, the medical examiner changed his mind about the time of death.
Through evidence on his body that was photographed, It was later determined by the medical examiner that he was killed around 2 to 3 in the morning.
Which was exactly the time Zuccarello claimed. While the defense scrambled to field more medical experts, the prosecution dropped another shocker.
One of the neighbors came forward and said that I had a house guest from out of town. He told me that morning that he had heard the gunshots that killed Stanley Cohen. What time was it? And his answer, which changed the course of the case, was it was 2:30 in the morning.
And it got worse.
They asked him, do you know how many shots were fired? Yes, I heard 4 shots. Do you know what kind of weapon it was? He said, yes, I'm a trained weapons expert from the military. It was a .38, which was, of course, the murder weapon.
And if that wasn't enough, another neighbor came forward with some damning evidence.
A neighbor across the street got home at 3:30 in the morning, and he did not hear any gunshots, but at 5:30 in the morning, heard the broken glass and then the alarm go off.
There was only one conclusion, prosecutors argued. Joyce Cohen was a lying murderer. When the jury went into deliberation on November 14, 1989, they had a lot to consider. Motive, the gunshot particles on Joyce's tissue, the time of death, and most of all, the credibility of Frank Zuccarello. It was not an easy decision.
You can see the things about her and her situation that might add up to, yes, she committed this murder, but you can also kind of see the other side of it.
The jury took 3 days to reach a verdict. They found Joyce guilty of murder in the first degree. In a sentencing hearing on November 21st, 1989, the jury was unable to choose between the death penalty and life in prison. With the jury deadlocked, the judge sentenced Joyce to 25 years to life in the Broward County Correctional Institute for Women.
I wouldn't say it was a Cinderella story, because obviously Cinderella ends on a happy note, and this one does not even come close to ending on a happy note.
But according to Joyce, the real ending hasn't been written yet. She still has hope that one day she'll be released from the nightmare that began in the early morning hours of March 7th, 1986.
And I'm very hopeful that the judge will see all of the deception and the manipulations that went on, the withholding of information that could have helped me at the trial, the use of false and perjured testimony. I have to believe someone's going to look at this sometime and say, you can't convict a person on this.
Those who are convinced of Joyce's guilt often point to her background when they're looking for a reason she would commit such a horrible crime. But even that leaves a lot of room for doubt.
If you look at female killers, you see things like abuse in foster care, and then, fear of abandonment, fear of losing what they've gained. But then you also, obviously, if you put everybody together on Earth that's had those backgrounds, they're not all killing.